He said that with such calmness that I started to argue with my own memory. The truth I knew was melting away like sugar in the sun. I didn't yet know what gaslighting was, but I felt that something was wrong. Dear daughter, it's nighttime, and the smell of rain mingles with the heavy silence of the house. I'm here, pen in hand, writing this so you can recognize when reality begins to slip through your fingers. At that time, I was full of hope. I wanted to believe that love could heal my insecurities, but loneliness trailed behind me like a shadow. And when he looked into my eyes and said all I needed to do was trust him, my heart skipped a beat. It was a gift, wrapped in promises. It was an ordinary day. We were talking, and suddenly he mentioned something I had done. I was caught off guard. You don't remember? You did this. He smiled, but there was a coldness behind the sweetness. My mind began to whirl, searching for what really happened. And then, I tried to argue. No, I didn't do that. But he kept going, in that gentle tone, as if he were telling a story. You just don't remember, dear. Sometimes things slip our minds. And I didn't realize. Each of his words was a drop of poison, slowly shaping my perception. At that sweet moment, I should have felt a warning, but the need to be loved made me ignore the discomfort that was growing inside me. Instead, I accepted his version of reality as if it were the absolute truth. That's when I realized the rule was already in action, caring disguised as control. He wanted to know where I was, who I was talking to, what I was doing, and I thought, he cares about me. I didn't see that in truth. He wanted to keep me tethered to his story. The consequences hit like a hurricane. Guilt, silence, an emptiness that echoed in my mind. Am I wrong? Confusion consumed me. My thoughts were distorted, and I felt lost. So listen to this. That day sounded like love, but it meant submission. I was pushed into a black hole, where the light of truth barely penetrated. Identify those red flags. When someone tries to rewrite your story, pause. When your memories are disregarded, stop. And when you hear phrases like, you don't remember, or, I just want what's best for you, use this line. My reality is valid, and I won't accept distorted versions. It wasn't my fault, but it's my responsibility to protect my truth. Take some time. Write down what you feel. Talk to someone you trust. In the next entry, I'll share the phrase I wished I had said at that moment, the one that could have changed everything. In that deafening silence, the feeling of being in a dead-end maze intensified. The walls of my mind seemed to close in as I tried to find a logical path. He laughed at me, not as someone who was enjoying themselves, but as if he were watching a play where I was the only actress. And I danced, following his instructions, believing I was creating art instead of losing myself. The truth is that subtle manipulation was like an invisible thread keeping me bound. With every conversation, every "I care about you," I felt smaller, as though I was shrinking to fit into the molds he had created for me. There were moments when I wanted to scream, but all I could manage was a soft whisper in solitude. It was on a gray afternoon that I reached my limit. We were on the couch, and the television was on, but the sound blended into the constant noise of my thoughts. He commented on something trivial, but the way he did it seemed laden with contempt. You never understand. You always get everything wrong. I looked at him, searching for a supportive glance, but what I saw was a mask of disdain. The fragility of my hopes shattered, and then nervousness took over me. Anger built up, like a bubble about to burst. I never do anything right? It was a question, but it sounded like a challenge. His smile disappeared instantly, replaced by a look that seemed to consider each word a crime. You're exaggerating. You always dramatize things. His words cut through me as if I were made of paper. And then, in a moment of clarity, I realized those were the pillars of our relationship. I was the drama queen, and he, the director controlling the script. At that moment, confusion began to dissipate like fog at dawn, and I didn't realize that all I needed to do was acknowledge that the drama wasn't mine. It was his production. However, even with this revelation, fear settled in. The fear of confronting him, of breaking the narrative he had woven around us. My body filled with insecurity, an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. I froze, searching for an alternative that wouldn't cost me my peace. It was in that moment that I remembered a phrase I once heard. When you feel small, it's sometimes because you're surrounded by people who feel far too big. The echo of that phrase reverberated within me. What if I decided not to be the supporting character in his story anymore? What if I allowed myself to be the protagonist of my own life again? I needed space, a breath of fresh air, and so I decided to walk away. Not physically that day, but emotionally. I looked out the window as the rain began to fall, as if the universe was sharing in my internal turmoil. The water washed away the marks of the past, cleansing every doubt that insisted on lingering. The following days were a battle. Every message from him turned into a storm of emotions. The desire to validate my memories fought against the weight of what he said. He sent me long messages detailing how everything was my fault, how I complicated a relationship that could have been perfect, and I wanted to believe it, but a part of me started to push back. Then, when he asked once again why I had pulled away, instead of apologizing like he always did, I took a step back. Because I'm not the person you say I am. And I didn't realize that this simple statement was already an act of rebellion and liberation. So, I chose to speak up. With a friend, with someone who could listen. The conversation was a revelation. She also knew that dysfunctional dance, that need to follow someone else's script. And I realized that the struggle wasn't just mine. Other women were also losing their stories. Use this lesson. If a love starts to feel more like a burden than a relief, if you find yourself questioning your sanity, abort the mission. Deconstructing what has been built so delicately takes courage, but it's the only way to reclaim your truth. It wasn't my fault, but it's my responsibility to protect myself. And now, I'm here, writing this for you. And as I finish this letter, I hope you know that there is strength in acknowledging your reality, in rewriting your narrative. In the next entry, I will share the sentence I wish I had said on that rainy afternoon, the one that could have changed everything. At that moment, while talking to my friend, a crack began to open in the wall I had built around myself. The conversation felt like a breath of fresh air in a suffocating space. I was listening to her words, but I also heard my own voice echoing in response. It was a silent confrontation between what I truly felt and what he insisted on making me believe. She shared her own battles, how she allowed herself to get lost in relationships that didn't value her. There was a strength in her words, a resilience that seemed to shine through the pain. And there, for the first time in a long time, I realized that I was not alone. The feeling of isolation began to dissipate, and the genuine connection brought an unexpected warmth to my frozen heart. And then, something inside me stirred. The idea that everything I desired could be rebuilt if I simply took the first step. It wasn't just about the dysfunctional relationship I was in. It was about the relationship I had with myself. The warmth of empathy in our exchanged glances ignited a spark, a reminder of what was important, of what needed to be rescued. I remembered a sunny day, long before all of this. I was at the park, running carefree and happy, laughing with friends. I can still recall the smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of birds singing, and the sun warming my skin. That was the girl I had lost. A woman not only full of hopes, but also brimming with dreams, filled with self-love. And I didn't realize that along the journey, every control disguised as concern drained that joy away. The need to please him, to appear perfect in his eyes, was like a slow poison. I became an artist of abandonment, a distant echo of that vibrant girl. On that day in the park, the shadows of the future hadn't yet obscured the brightness of clarity that came from knowing I was enough. Returning to our conversation, courage began to bloom within me like a flower struggling for light through cracks. "I've been so lost," I confessed. The words flowed from me like a dammed river, creating space for truth. And when they finally escaped, the weight I had been carrying started to dissipate. I felt like I could be more than just a supporting character in his story. I could be the protagonist of my own plot. In the weeks that followed, that decision to listen to my inner voice became a ritual. I started waking up earlier, savoring the serenity of the morning. I would look in the mirror and say, "You are strong. Your story matters." Each affirmation felt like a mantra, a constant reminder that the reality I had accepted was not the only possibility. And then, at least once a week, I wrote letters to myself. In them, I shared my fears, my desires, and even the memories he had tried to erase. It was like building a fortress where I could reside without fear. Each phrase became an anchor, a crucial piece in constructing my new identity. Meanwhile, his manipulation didn't fade away easily. His messages kept coming, the emotional pleas, and the attempts to reconnect. But now, instead of giving in, I viewed those words as an opportunity to reaffirm my strength. I'm no longer your puppet, I thought. My life won't dance to the rhythms you want. The pivotal moment occurred on a specific night when he called me to talk. His tone was soft, but it no longer held the power it once had over me. I went. Not because I felt afraid or obligated, but because I was ready to put what I had learned to the test. We sat down, and he started to talk, but I was no longer listening with the same vulnerability. With every word, I assessed what he was saying, and understood that what he said no longer defined who I was. And then, his words transformed into a distant echo. The coldness in his gaze no longer paralyzed me. "You don't understand," he said, raising an eyebrow. "You're still the same. You should be grateful that I care." And I didn't realize that this was the key moment. Firmly, I responded, "I am not obligated to live your version of the truth. I appreciate it, but I don't need your approval to exist." The silence that followed was almost palpable, an absence of words that seemed to fill the space between us with a new energy. I had found my voice, and every letter that came from it was like a revelation. It wasn't my fault, but now, it was my responsibility to claim my truth. As I closed that chapter, I understood that true liberation came from confronting the story I had allowed others to write. And so, by writing this letter, I let its pages become a symbol of resistance. In the next entry, I'll share the phrase I treasure like a gem, the one that could have changed everything, the one that could have redeemed me. As I watched the expression on his face change, a strange feeling washed over me. It was as if a veil was being lifted, revealing not only the man standing before me but also all the echoes of my insecurities. The tension in the air was palpable, and yet, there was a restless freedom pulsing inside me. He looked at me with a mix of disbelief and anger, but something had shifted. His fear was no longer about losing control, but rather about the possibility of me finally reclaiming my voice. And there I was, standing so small in front of someone I had projected to be too big. Yet, at the same time, I realized that his greatness was made of fragility. In an instant, the memories of the woman I once was flashed before me. I remembered the girl who ran through the park, innocent and full of life. That child knew that words held power and never hesitated to use them. "Why are you still here?" the girl inside me whispered. "You deserve more." And then, to my own surprise, a wave of compassion surged. I looked at him and realized that behind that controlling facade, there was a man who also wrestled with his own shadows, a weakness he never allowed me to see. The need for control came from his own fear of being abandoned, and I had been the mirror reflecting his insecurities. This recognition felt almost cruel. This empathy, although powerful, did not erase the pain he had caused. Transformation did not mean forgiveness. And then, it was when I knew I needed to establish a clear boundary between us. The truth is that no love justifies pain. "Your insecurities are not my responsibility," I declared, feeling each syllable resonate in my body. And I didn't realize that this statement would trigger a new phase in my journey. With every word, I gained more space to breathe. The weight of expectation began to dissipate slowly, giving way to a light relief I hadn't felt in a long time. He tried to argue, but his voice lost strength. What once sounded like a command was now merely a distant echo. I knew he wanted me to retreat, to return to the role of supporting character, but something had changed irreversibly within me. Resistance transformed into self-confidence. And when I finally left the house that night, the rain had lessened, but the smell of wet earth filled the air. It was as if nature was celebrating my liberation. Each drop that fell seemed to wash away not only my scars, but also the broken promises I had accepted as truths. I wasn't free yet, but the path was becoming clearer every day. In my mind, I repeated the phrase I had kept secret. My story is worth telling. In that moment, I understood that creating my own narrative was a daily struggle, but one worth fighting for. In the next entry, I will share the phrase that I really wish I had said to change everything, and finally open the doors to my true freedom. That phrase had been trapped for so long, but now it is getting ready to come out.